Hello and welcome to our fourth instalment in our One Fact About Every Single Taylor Swift Song series, and in this episode we're going to be deep diving into the Red album, exploring the fun, strange, curious or random facts about every single one of its tracks, including the original standard edition, the deluxe inclusions, and obviously the Taylor's version vault editions, as well as Red add-ons. So both the original iteration of Red and the re-recorded Red Taylor's version are considered by many to be the crowning jewels in Taylor's discography. When it was first released back in 2012, Red's eclectic nature that explored all facets of heartbreak was criticised by some, which would eventually lead to a domino effect defining Taylor's next moves in her career path. However, that didn't stop Red from being ranked as one of the top albums released in the 2010s decade. Rolling Stone placed it at 99 in its 500 greatest albums of all time list. Another major factor in Red's popularity was obviously All Too Well, which is an essential fan favourite that has only grown in popularity over time, solidifying itself as one of Taylor's most masterful lyrical creations with the release of the 10-minute version on Red Taylor's version. And interestingly, this song then went on to become the longest number one song in chart history, surpassing Don McLean's 1972 song American Pie. Topping the Billboard Hot 100 the same week Red Taylor's version topped the Billboard 200, it marked Taylor's record-extending third time to debut atop both charts in the same week. So obviously we're going to be running through the entirety of Red, as we said, all the different iterations, original, deluxe, Taylor's version, and some additional add-ons in tracklist order, obviously starting off with State of Grace.
Starting off with probably my favourite song off the whole album, at least back in the day it was. I don't know, because there's a lot of strong new contenders with the Taylor's version, yes. Vault editions. But anyway, State of Grace was one of the few songs from Red that was released before the album. It was because from September the 24th, in 2012, until the album's release date, Taylor did a countdown to Red, in which she released one album track each week through Good Morning America. And those tracks were Begin Again, Red, I Knew You Were Trouble, and State of Grace, which was released on October 16th. The other three tracks, strangely enough, all went on to become singles, but State of Grace obviously did not. However, even though it was never a single, it is the only song from Red with an official acoustic version, and it became the opener for the Red tour. Apart from that, it was also performed for the first time on the X Factor in the USA. So I think this is a song that Taylor quite liked from Red. She has performed it over the years, and it was one of the first surprise songs on the Eras tour as well. So it has always had, though it was never a single, it's always had a place in her heart, I think.
So next is obviously track 2, which is Red, and interestingly and very recently, after being featured in the trailer for The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 3, Daylight and the kind of Red remix, with Red only being heard for a couple of seconds at the end when Conrad appears, both Red the song and Red Taylor's version the album saw an incredible boost in streams because of this small little feature in the trailer, which proves the importance of the Taylor's version re-recordings and being able to select which projects are being used for television and movies, which is interestingly part of Austin Swift's responsibilities, and obviously the importance of Taylor now owning the masters for her music and then publishing and how it's being distributed and the legacy that she's leaving. And it's just very interesting that just that small little inclusion in a trailer would lead to a boost in streams.
Next up, of course, we have Treacherous, and this is one of the two songs that was co-written and produced, both the original and the Taylor's version, by Dan Wilson. Dan Wilson has a very impressive list of writing credits, and I'm sure you probably may not recognise his name, but would recognise some of the songs that he's collaborated on. For example, one of the biggest ones, apart from Taylor's, is Someone Like You by Adele. He also collaborated recently with Jon Batiste on Butterfly, which was nominated for Song of the Year at the Grammys, and White Horse with Chris Stapleton, which was also nominated at the Grammys. For Taylor, of course, we have Treacherous and another song, which is Come Back Be Here, which were both written around the same time in spring of 2012.
Next is I Knew You Were Trouble, and this was one of the last songs written for Red in the summer of 2012, alongside 22. And in the music video, Taylor wears a basic dot t-shirt, which she also wore on the Paul O'Grady show in May of 2009, 3 years prior. But in the music video for I Knew You Were Trouble, she'd kind of ripped up the sleeves a bit.
That leads us to the track 5, at least for a long time, which is All Too Well. As we know, Taylor began writing All Too Well after a 6-month drought following what she described at that point as a toxic relationship that was so overpowering she wasn't even able to write lyrics about it at first. Though we were of course first introduced to this 5-minute version from the very first day of Red's release, Taylor was revealing that the song had been much longer and that she had called up Liz Rose to help her pare it down. This song is, alongside Sparks Fly, probably one of her songs with the most history and lore to it. It really does have a lot of moments, and it's kind of incredible how we take it for granted now that we did get to finally see that 10-minute version after so many years, it being just like this meme or this funny thing in the fandom.
Yeah, no, it is crazy, the kind of, again, like how its history has kind of led to its now 10-minute version, similar with Sparks Fly, that Speak Now release version, its history, what it then became to then be released like that, and how lucky we are to have that version. Next is obviously 22, and interestingly 22 is said a total of 13 times, and every so often in Taylor's songs she'll repeat a certain word or phrase that amount of times purely for luck.
As for our I Almost Do, an interesting fact is that due to strong digital download sales when Red was released, the song peaked at number 65 and 50 on the Billboard Hot 100 and the Canadian Hot 100 respectively. It also charted on the US country songs, peaking at, again, lucky number 13.
Next is We're Never Ever Getting Back Together, and this is the most played song from Red live, with a total of around 420 performances. Around 370 of these are purely on its own, not remixed or mashed with anything, and the other 50-ish are remix versions with This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things from the Reputation Stadium tour.
Next up we have the contentious Stay, 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 and funnily enough, the copyright on this song dates it back to 2010, meaning that it may be as old or even older than All Too Well. However, it may just have been like a first draft and it wasn't completed until much later in the process of writing Red, which would mean that it still makes All Too Well the first song on Red to actually be completed for that album.
Next is obviously The Last Time, and interestingly, an interview with Gary Lightbody, who is the duet and one of the co-writers on the song. He revealed that he met Taylor through Ed Sheeran, and that the night before he met Taylor, Ed and Taylor had been playing and singing his song Set the Fire to the Third Bar together. And what's interesting is then that kind of then led to them writing a song together, which interestingly I think is very similar to the kind of like duet nature of Set the Fire to the Third Bar. Now they have a song together, and Gary Lightbody said that it was a really great experience, and before Ed had introduced her, he had never met Taylor. So he now kind of have re-collabed again with the Taylor's version.
I do think that the song Set the Fire to the Third Bar can be, like, its influence can be felt in The Last Time, and I love that
Definitely.
song. If you are a fan of The Last Time and you've never listened to Set the Fire to the Third Bar, which is a Snow Patrol song from back in the day, definitely do, because I think that collaboration is also a really fun one, and it plays around with that same idea of two people talking in a way, having a conversation in song form, and then like the harmonies and things. Yeah, I can definitely see how Taylor was influenced by that. Next up is Holy Ground, and this song has been played by Taylor over the years very consistently whenever she has had the chance. Since it was released, the only years it hasn't been played in, at least once, were 2012, which was the release year, and it was late in the year, so she didn't have much time anyway. 2017, which, to be honest, we only had one performance, like proper, and then a few of Reputation promotional performances. 2020, 2021, and 22, which again, strange times in which Taylor wasn't really performing much anyway due to the global pandemic and other things like that. However, all of the other years, she's always like kind of added it into set list. In 2013 and 14, it was of course on the Red Tour set list. In 2015, she performed it in Dublin for the 1989 World Tour as a surprise song. In 2016, she added it to the Formula One US Grand Prix, which was like kind of her greatest hits type show at that point, and it was quite a surprising song to hear on that set list.
Yes, and also one of her best performances, I think, of that song. Like, she was kind of like, a bit like grustly, wasn't she? It was a really cool performance.
That's the one that many people pick up, like the dust, how she said dust, which was quite, like you said, described. So that was a very fun one. And then since then, she's kind of tried to add it to different kind of like shows, which we'll get to another interesting one in a minute. But in 2018, she performed it at the Reputation Stadium tour in Seattle on May the 20th as a surprise song. And then here we have another one of my favourites. 2019, we have the BBC live lounge performance of it on piano. Brilliant one.
gorgeous. Yeah, really stunning, really cool.
Unfortunately, like I said, we didn't get any more until 2023 and 2024, in which she performed it at the Eras Tour, in 2023 at East Rutherford on May the 27th, and then in 2024 various times. We had it in Tokyo in February, then in July she played it mashed up with Sweeter Than Fiction in Amsterdam, and then again mashed up in Indianapolis in November, mashed with The Albatross.
Next is Sad Beautiful Tragic, and what's interesting about this song is that Taylor has replaced the adjectives magic for tragic in her lyrics twice, both with similar devastating effect. Obviously in Sad Beautiful Tragic, it's a beautiful magic love, which then gets replaced to what a sad, beautiful, tragic. And then 12 years later, in the Black Dog on the Torch Poets Department anthology, it has a similar kind of switch up. So the first kind of magic lyric is, but she's too young to know that this song was intertwined in the magic fibre of our dreaming, then switched up later to, but she's too young to know that this song was intertwined in the tragic. So that's interesting that sad, beautiful, tragic has kind of, its kind of lyrical play on words has kind of been replicated later on.
That leads us to the 13th song on the album, The Lucky One. Of course, it's track 13, so lucky is mentioned, and lucky, the word, is said 13 times in the song, and the song has a 13-second intro, so a lot of 13s. But a more pressing theory and question about this song is, who is it actually about? The secret message is, wouldn't you like to know? And that has led many, many people to speculate about all different types of candidates. If you've ever had any ideas, or if you've looked into any speculation or theories, then please let us know in the comments, because I read so many different things that were all like equally plausible. However, I think like the one that people seem to be mentioning the most, the person, is Joni Mitchell, which makes a lot of sense. Taylor was has always been a lot into her music, but in 2012 she was like deeply into her music, and then like the fallout happened between
and then
them.
Taylor literally said like, don't give me a bottle of wine and ask me about Joni Mitchell, otherwise I'll just cry.
Yeah, which makes sense, because basically from what we know, what happened was that Taylor was rumoured to kind of like be the actress to represent Joni Mitchell in like a biopic kind of thing, and Joni didn't have the best opinion of Taylor.
No, it was basically the only similarity is that she has like high cheekbones or something.
Yeah, it was along those lines. And since then, Taylor hasn't really spoken about her very much. And it's kind of sad. It's like one of those things like never meet your idols, because unfortunately they might not live up to what you thought of them. Still, nevertheless, as for The Lucky One, many people, like I said, speculate. Have you ever thought of anyone else, Cameron?
I don't know. I think, to be fair, the kind of Joni Mitchell kind of speculations, I feel like for me seem to make the most sense, especially at the time when, like you said, Taylor was obsessed with kind of Joni and her songwriting, and like I do think the elements of her album Blue were massively inspired with Red, picking that colour and that emotion. So I think it makes sense, but I guess, unless Taylor says, we'll never know. So next is Everything Has Changed, and this is the second song co-written between Ed and Taylor, but was the first one to be released. And interestingly, it was performed together for the very first time in December on the 7th in 2012, which was at the Z100 Jingle Ball. And then it obviously went on to become a single with a music video, and then had a slight continuation later with The Joker and the Queen, where the music video for that song, which is Ed's song, which Taylor then featured on a remix of, shows the kind of story of the two kids in the Everything Has Changed music video and their kind of journey of going to college, uni, and it was really emotional. Watching that music video was so, like, to watch that 10 years later after being so obsessed with that music video and that song, and then to see the kind of continuation was really, really cool.
It was, and I think it just tied in so well with Ed's era at that time, with Taylor's era. Obviously she was re-recording Red, so it all kind of like came together very well, and it was touching. Yeah. That leads us to Starlight, and Starlight was written about Ethel and Robert Kennedy being the brother of John F. Kennedy, the US president. She wrote this song after seeing a picture of Ethel and Robert, or Bobby Kennedy, together when they were 17, and she was kind of like inspired and dreamt up the scenario. An interesting lyric is the "have 10 kids" lyric, which a lot of people sometimes laugh about, but however it does kind of mimic real life, because Ethel and Bobby did have 11 kids. However, sadly their last daughter was born after Robert Kennedy's assassination. Taylor first performed Starlight during the Ripple of Hope Gala, which is hosted by the Kennedy family and was held on December 3rd 2012 in New York City. As for Begin Again, we're about to say some of the places that were featured in the music video, so sorry to any French listeners for any butchering of the language.
And Lisa is specifically reading these out because if I attempt it with my British accent, I will sound daft. So we've swapped around.
That's fine.
It's on Lisa.
We try our best. So firstly,
Yes.
the main place that a lot of people visit when they go to Paris is La Palais, which is the cafe that Taylor filmed part of the video in. In fact, I've seen a lot of people actually like recreate
sit in the same seat and everything.
Yeah, which is a fun thing to do. It's a very different thing to do. It's kind of like the Black Dog in a way. It wasn't said, but it was very heavily featured, so there you go. We also have the bridge at the start, which is where all those love locks are, which is quite a famous place in Paris as well, which is Pont des Arts. She also walks down that bridge, and of course we can see the Louvre in the background. She also walks around the Ile de la Cité, which is where she passes different statues and different bridges. And then finally the scenes in which she's in that lovely purple flowy dress on the rooftop. Apparently that is the rooftop of the Galeries Lafayette flagship, and in the background you can see the Palais Garnier.
Next is The Moment I Knew, and Taylor once saw this song written out in a Tumblr post and didn't even recognise it as her own song at first. After thinking how sad it is, she then realised it was actually her own song, which is quite ironic because for a very long time there was only really one kind of interaction or mention of her kind of engaging with this song, which was at some like Target event where she was like putting her hands in the air pretending she was kind of like in a club.
Oh god, yes.
Yeah.
I remember that video.
And other than kind of like an Eras Tour performance, that was kind of it really for a very long time. So it's interesting that even she forgot that this song existed. Those kind of red deluxe songs were like kind of lost to the world for a very long time.
Definitely, yeah. One that kind of did evade that being lost to the world is Come Back Be Here. I think is probably the only one that kind of got away with it a bit more.
Yeah.
And having said that, after being asked to perform the song for many years, she only sang Come Back Be Here for the first time live on August the 5th, 2018, which was at the Reputation Stadium tour. So it evaded it in a way because since then it has been played various times, like at the Eras Tour and at other moments. However, before that, didn't really evade it, so there you go.
Whereas the next song, Girl at Home, is the only song from the original Red album that's never, ever, ever, ever been performed live. And also, interestingly, Girl at Home is obviously the only Taylor's version where the re-recording is totally different and is kind of like a revamped production. And what's interesting is that the original is now kind of referred to as like a demo. And according to fans, they kind of believe that maybe the change and the kind of revamping and kind of amping up of Girl at Home for the Taylor's version might be that maybe Taylor felt that nobody really wanted to hear the song and maybe she thinks it's very unpopular, and maybe this, by changing up the production, it would lead people to kind of listen to it. I think yes and no. Personally, I think that it is probably one of the most like publicly disliked songs within the fandom, and there isn't much of a kind of, I don't know, like want and desire to have this song. So I guess by changing up the production, it did lead people to listen to it, and then it had its little moment, whereas it's never really had a little moment. But I do prefer that original.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Production, I'm not a big fan of. I just don't think it just really stands out on Red. Like when I listen to the Taylor's version, I'm like, where's this come from? You know, like
yeah.
I don't know.
It's just suddenly got that beat in the background, and it's like, oh. It throws you off, yeah, especially because we're so used to it. But let us know in the comments, do you prefer demo version or do you prefer a remix version of Girl at Home? So then we would go into the songs that now only officially appear on Red after Taylor's version. And the first one is Ronan. Taylor wrote the song by putting together quotes from Maya Thompson's blog named Rockstar Ronan, which detailed the sad story of the diagnosis, illness, and sadly passing away of Ronan Thompson, her 4-year-old son, who suffered from cancer. Taylor and Maya are both credited as co-writers of the song, mainly because Taylor was very much inspired and took literal quotes from the blog and put them into the song, like copy and pasted, basically. So the proceeds from its sale go to help fight cancer. Taylor hasn't performed this song many times. The first was performed live for Stand Up to Cancer in September of 2012, and the only other time that she performed it was at the Glendale stop of the 1989 World Tour, which was because Maya Thompson and her family were in attendance on that day.
So next is obviously Better Man, and while All Too Well was the first song Taylor wrote and later finished for Red all the way back in 2011 during the Speak Now World Tour, the next song she completed seems to have been Better Man. So basically, Taylor revealed that it was written during a hotel stop on the European leg of the Speak Now World Tour, which places it in and around kind of May of 2011, and many believe that it would have been written in Madrid. And Taylor said to Amazon Music, "I remember I was on tour and I wrote it alone in a hotel room, and I remember standing in front of the mirror. I think the first thing I thought was, I wish it wasn't 4 a.m. standing in a mirror saying to myself, you know, you had to do it. And that was an actual visual from my life. There were just too many songs I loved that I had written in that period of time, so some of them have been left off. I think I chose All Too Well over Better Man." However, this was not the end of the story for Better Man, which was later released by Little Big Town and then finally had its Taylor's version release over 10 years later after it was originally written. And I'm so glad that we do have the Taylor's version of it. I remember when the Little Big Town version was released and how obsessed I was. I used to listen to it and just imagine what Taylor would sound like on this song. And then she performed it live, I believe, for Super Saturday Night. And that was the only version I would listen to for a very long time. And then she performed it again on the Reputation Stadium tour. I had some dodgy audio of it and I was just obsessed with that version. And then we got the demo a couple of a couple of days before Red Taylor's version. So it's so cool that we have all these different kind of iterations and versions.
It has a long story, yeah.
Yes, but the Taylor's version for me, I feel like really nicely kind of like has all the best elements of all the different versions, and I feel like is for me the version of Better Man.
I remember
it's the most ethereal.
I used to listen to it. I think she performed it at Bluebird Cafe or something, and then it was featured in like a documentary or something. But bloody Scott Borchetta was in the middle talking, and I was like, shut up.
Spoke over half of it, yeah.
Could you please be quiet? I know that was probably, it was their splicing it together, but every time I would listen, I'd be like, oh, now he's going to talk for a minute. Can he not?
Yeah. I'm also... I do remember listening to that version.
I'm also glad that we did get the Taylor's version, because it is like the heightened version of, like you said, all of those best parts put together. But it's funny how we finally got that demo all those years later. Another song we heard about sometime prior to its release is Nothing New, and we first kind of got a glimpse of this song in the Lover Diaries, and this one she wrote on a plane ride from Perth to Sydney, and she wrote it on the Appalachian dulcimer, which she bought that same day. And again, mentioning Joni Mitchell here because she was inspired by her and how she had played most of it on her Blue record. So very much, like you said, Cameron, connections between them. Taylor revealed that she had taught herself to play A Case of You on the Appalachian dulcimer, and then she wrote this song, and the lyrics featured were, "I'm getting older and less sure of what you like about me anyway," and then the chorus, "How can a person know everything at 18 and nothing at 22, and will you still want me when I'm nothing new?" So as we can see, she definitely had the bare bones of it back in the day. Of course, then we never heard of that song again until it appeared as one of the vault tracks on Red.
So next is obviously Babe, and this is the second song from the vault that we'd heard before the release of Red Taylor's version that was recorded by a different artist. And Taylor had said about this that the story behind this is that sometimes she writes a song that she absolutely loves, but it just doesn't fit the vibe of an album that she's made. So she holds it back in the hope that maybe one day it'll have its moment, whether it's sung by her or another artist. And in this case, that artist was then Sugarland, which is really interesting that the kind of only really two songs that she's kind of like given to artists during her kind of like major career, and kind of there are other songs here and there back in the day. However, like the two kind of prominent ones were from Red. Yeah. Even though they were released during the kind of late 1989 and then
Reputation.
Late kind of Reputation. Era.
And also both very country.
Yes, both very country. And what's interesting is then like Better Man went on to win country awards, so like best song of the year and stuff, which is crazy that all those years later it would still kind of hold so kind of relevant, and it just shows the quality of the song. But anyways, Babe, back onto Babe, was written with Pat Monahan, who is from the band Train.
Then we have Message in a Bottle, and this is a funny quote that a lot of people harken back to when they saw this name of this song on the Taylor's version track list. And basically because Taylor teased this song, or at least the idea of it, way back in 2012 when she kind of said, speaking about Red and how she'd written the songs about it, she said, "Songs for me are like a message in a bottle. You send them out into the world and maybe the person who you feel that way about will hear about it someday." She also revealed when this song was released that this was probably the first song that Max Martin, Shellback and her had ever worked on together.
And I personally believe that this was probably the song that was interrupted.
Yeah.
That then that was interrupted, and then We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together then became.
It would make sense.
That's not like truth.
No, that's just our conjectures. Yeah. Yeah, because if this was the first one that they were writing, we'd have to go back and kind of like go back into the red timelines of it all to see if they had worked
kind of decipher
previously before, or if the We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together was like the one that they worked on chronologically first in the Stand Up album. Anyway, we'd have to look into that, but it could be. It could well be.
Next is obviously I Bet You Think About Me, and this song was first discovered when it was registered in October of 2011, and then a work tape recording of the song was later bought in 2017 by the Taylor Swift Inner Circle, who said of the song that Taylor shares the contrast between her life growing up and that of a boy she loves. She grew up in a silver spoon gated community and she was raised on a farm. Despite them being in love, reality set in and he realised they were two different stay together forever. This is perhaps the most valuable and rare unreleased song in our collection. The chord progression and vocal melodies are incredibly beautiful throughout. The vocal lines tend to play over and over in my head long after listening to the song.
Okay.
Interestingly, this and their supposed other diamond jewel in their collection, which was the Better Man demo.
Yeah, we have them all.
Obviously, we got the Better Man demo leaked. However, we haven't had the original I Bet You Think About Me demo. However, we do now have the Taylor's version. And from what Steve of the Inner Circle seemed to mention of the song Silver Spoon Gated Community, Raised on a Farm, Reality Set In, seems like the lyrics from that original demo
the same
to kind of basically match the Taylor's version.
Yeah. What I love when we look into these Inner Circle reveals, their little descriptions of songs, and I'm sure that one day we'll have to make, perhaps when debut TV is around the corner, or right, because they speak about a lot of unreleased songs, is how they describe the songs and how, like, you will get glimpses into the lyrics and then you will always get a little boast of this is the best song that she's ever made. Yes.
Yeah.
It reminds me of.
It's so beautiful. Yes, yeah.
Which is so funny.
This is the crowning jewel. Yeah, no, it's always funny that he uses lyrics and then proceeds to boast.
Yeah. Yeah, but the lyric thing is very interesting, and again, I'd like to go back, if we can, at some point, and kind of like dig into the ones that are still unreleased, and see if we can guess any lyrics. That would be interesting.
Yes.
Next up, we have Forever Winter, and sadly for this song, this is the only Red Vault track that we have never seen or heard performed live yet. Maybe one day she'll get to it, but unfortunately on the Eras tour, she didn't perform this song.
Next is Run, and the day that Taylor and Ed first met, which was May 15th, 2012, they both tweeted about eating burgers and scribbling onto guitars and writing songs. And for a while, many kind of believed that Everything Had Changed was written on that day. However, the first song that they wrote together was actually Run. And it was completed at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel where Ed Sheeran was staying, and the original lyrics were kind of written on a notepad with the hotel branding on it, hence why we know that. And then it appears to be that Everything Has Changed was written a couple of weeks later at Taylor's house, which I believe was when they were jumping on trampolines and eating apple pie.
That's it, it's something like that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They were always doing some weird activity and eating some food.
Eating burgers, and because her trampoline, I believe, was in the middle of a tennis court.
I think so, yeah. That's how it goes. Also, as we're speaking about Ed and Taylor, for anyone who hasn't seen Ed Sheeran, he's promoting his new album, or, you know, the start of the album cycle anyway.
Single.
Yeah. And his new single it talks about his old phone, how he discovered it again, and he's posted loads of old photos from back in the day, which many of them are like unseen, or photos that we have seen, but like the second photo in the set that we haven't, you know? So he's actually posted quite a lot of content from the Red Tour and the Red era, and a bit of the 1989 era as well, of him and Taylor. So if you haven't seen those yet, check them out, because it's a lot of like rare photos from back in the day that are really a blast from the past, but they're from this era of when they had written these two songs together. Next up, we have The Very First Night, and in many ways it really does feel like the prequel song to 1989. It has a lot of references to themes on the album, and also a lot of lyrics that are later developed in Taylor's next studio album, 1989. Taylor performed the song live for the first time on November 9th, 2023 at the Eras tour.
Next is obviously All Too Well 10-minute version, and on March 27th, 2025, All Too Well became the first, and at this point of recording, only Taylor's version song to reach 1 billion streams on Spotify. It is, of course, also the longest song to reach this number of streams, But interestingly, Taylor also has another 14 songs that have surpassed the 1 billion streams, but of course none of them are Taylor's versions, nor are they from Red. The next TV that might make it to the billion is Love Story Taylor's version, that is around 965 million as of when we're recording this episode. However, Love Story OG is also at 985 million. The next Red song that might make it to a billion is I Knew You Were Trouble original at 944 million, whereas the Taylor's version is at 445 million. And what is interesting is, even though there are no Taylor's versions that have hit a billion, there are many songs that Taylor owns that have hit the a billion, songs from Lover, and so on.
So basically the TLDR is, if you want to listen to Love Story, stream that Taylor's version so it can catch up.
That should be the only version you listen to anyway.
Yeah, very true. If you want to listen to the OG, you've got a CD from back in the day. You can listen to it on there. But if you're gonna stream, it has to be the Taylor's version so we can get it to a billion before the original, which would be so poetic. But even now, to be honest, to have it catch up with, Love Story, which is such a big song, to have it catch up just in that small amount of time that it has been out, 4 years at this point, as we not long ago celebrated the anniversary for Fearless Taylor's version. It is quite poetic, and I'm glad that the 10-minute version was the first Taylor's version one to get over that billion stream mark. So finally, we have to move on to the more Red chapter added songs. So these songs basically were released to celebrate the start of the Eras tour back in 2023, and as for Red, they added 2 more songs to the album. We also had songs added to Fearless, strangely enough, and to Lover. However, for Red, we got the 2 Hunger Games songs added to the album. So both of these songs, Eyes Open Taylor's version and Safe and Sound Taylor's version, were originally written for the Hunger Games songs from District 12 and beyond. Eyes Open was released as the single to promote that album on March 27th, 2012, and it's a solo write by Taylor. What she did was kind of write from the perspective of Katniss Everdeen, the protagonist from the Hunger Games, and the lyrics describe her trajectory through the Hunger Games. Taylor performed this acoustically at a concert for Speak Now World Tour. So that is why, again, a lot of people debate.
That's why I am adamant it's a Speak Now song. It was during the Speak Now era. She was performing at the Speak Now World Tour. It is not a Red song.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of people, but really, you're the...
It's just me. It's just me.
No, I'm sure there's other people as well.
This is so Red.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know why in my head it's always been Red, in the way Sweeter Than Fiction has always been 1989, even though there's a bloody Red photo shoot picture on the cover of that single still. But yeah, so she was performing it at the Speak Now World Tour as a surprise song. However, because it's 2012, I do feel like we move on to Red, like you said, the bangs. Anyway, the song was unfortunately leaked before its official release in March of 2012 on the 20th. After that, we did get a lyric video, and the single went on to be sent to radio, and it did do pretty well. However, we didn't get the re-release until almost to the date, 11 years later, on March 17th. 2023.
Next, and obviously part of that original Hunger Games soundtrack and the more Red chapter, and released alongside Eyes Open, was also Safe and Sound, which originally was released as a promotional single featuring the Civil Wars. And the theory surrounding the music video is that Taylor is a representation of Prim, who, if you haven't watched or read the Hunger Games, is Katniss' sister. So yeah, it's supposed to be a representation of Prim's ghost haunting District 12, a theory believes from a fan. What's interesting is obviously it features the Civil Wars, who also wrote Kingdom Come for that same Hunger Games album. And over a decade later, they were credited on the song as Joe Williams and John Paul White, separately rather than together as the Civil Wars, and that is due to the band have broken up since the original release of Safe and Sound. And what's interesting is Abraham's Daughter and Safe and Sound were nominated for the 2013 Grammy Awards, firstly for Best Song Written for Visual Media, and second for Best Country Duo/Group Performance, and also Best Song Written for Visual Media, with the latter of which ending up winning. Safe and Sound was also nominated for the Golden Globe Award for Best Original Song at the 2013 ceremony. And then what's quite interesting with Safe and Sound is it then had a weird kind of resurgence around folklore, because lots of people kind of reference the sound of Safe and Sound with folklore, and feels weirdly kind of part of that universe and world.
It does. I think a lot of the time when we spoke about folklore back in the day and when people were about to listen to it, or when they did really feel like, oh yeah, it's part of like the expanded universe of folklore, this Safe and Sound. And I think Joe Williams and John Paul White, the music that they created when they were the Civil Wars together, that sound is very much folklore. Kingdom Come is very much folklore. It is the indie kind of acousticy sounds that they made and that Taylor contributed to. And yeah, I definitely see them in the same world. And I know that you have Safe and Sound on the folklore playlist, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I do. Yep. Yes, I have a folklorian Woods playlist, which is basically anything that's... So there's stuff from TTPD on there. Obviously, all the like Renegades and Carolinas of the world, but they kind of feel like that word anyway.
Yeah.
And yes, I also have Safe and Sound in that playlist. It's basically anything that feels like that vibe. And it fits in, you know, it's not like Whiplash after Cardigan or something. You're like, what the hell?
No, it does fit.
It flows very nicely.
Again, it's like a story written from a different perspective of a different world, very much so in this case, because written from like Katniss and Prim and all this point of view. So it's funny to speak about these songs now because obviously the Hunger Games as well are having a bit of a resurgence once again.
It's having a massive resurgence, and when these songs came out was when I believe Songbird Ballad of Snakes, whatever it's called.
Yeah, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It's a mouthful, yeah.
That's it, yeah. The book and movie were kind of coming out and being massively promoted, so it was a really cool time. It definitely felt like we were back in 2012, what with the kind of the release of Red, the album, and also Hunger Games kind of taking over popular culture again, which is really cool. And hopefully, maybe we might get Taylor and Hunger Games again with the new release of...
That would be fun.
I think that it was very, very cool. They always pick very cool artists. Potentially someone like Sabrina, I think, might maybe get it.
Yeah, I don't know. Olivia...
I'd love to see Taylor back on the Hunger Games.
Was on the previous one.
Olivia Lord.
Yeah, and she did a very good job. I know that was a very much loved song as well. So hopefully
Lord.
Yeah.
Anyone cool used to do it back in the day.
Oh, back in the day, everyone was on it.
Grande, Coldplay, Ellie Goulding, Lord, Sia, The Weeknd, everyone did it. It was like the thing to do, wasn't it? So hopefully we might have another Hunger Games / Taylor thing.
It would be fun. Yeah, it would be fun. Yes.
Yes. We've obviously come to the end of this episode and kind of worked through the mammoth that is Red, Taylor's version.
It's a long one.
The More Vault and this and that. But we do hope that you enjoyed this episode and hopefully learned something new. Let us know anything that you didn't know or extra facts about songs that we haven't mentioned, because there are hundreds. But as we mentioned right at the start of this episode is part of a series where we're going through each album and going through each individual song, kind of giving fun facts. And obviously we have released Debut, Fearless and Speak Now, and obviously now with Red. And if you haven't checked those previous episodes / album facts out, make sure to give those a listen. If you are listening on YouTube and are not yet subscribed, it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to us. If you're listening on audio only format, we'd also like it if you would rate us, and if you want to stay up to date with all things Swiftly Spoken, new episodes, then make sure to follow us over on Instagram. Our handle is @SwiftlySpokenPodcast, and thanks again for waiting around for our little mini break, and we really do hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to our next incoming episodes. But thanks again, and we'll speak soon.